Hello everyone, my name is Akal, and what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Vishakha Nakshatra, and I want to talk about the planetary energies that make up Vishakha, as well as the four padas within Vishakha, and the four padas are the four divisions, because this adds additional planetary energies. Let's say you were born in the third pada, that would be ruled by Mercury. And so, in other words, what you end up doing is you start seeing how Mercury then adds another layer of complexity here. So when you're thinking about the nakshatras, you got to think about like there's multiple layers, you know. So we're talking about this like how do we get to the core of the onion kind of idea? Well, you have to go through multiple planetary energies in order to sort of make your way into what the core of, in this particular case, Vishakha is. So Vishakha Nakshatra, it's this is one of those nakshatras that part of me wants to say I'm sorry if you have a lot of this in your chart like I do, but it's actually not none of the nakshatras are bad, right? None of the nakshatras are evil or demonic. I mean, they make it these classifications sometimes, but what it is that so something is only bad if you are incapable of growing from the lessons that come through having this energy in your chart. Okay, so if you're thinking of like, hey, I've got Mula Nakshatra or Ardra or Purvabhadrapada or Ajlesha. Like these nakshatras generally have like these descriptions that are like, oh God, you know. The reality is though, um, everything is about choice, and so I think Vishaka is the how do I say this? It is the pinnacle of needing to understand choice, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first off, we have to look at the gunas. We have to look at the fundamental energies that underlie this nakshatra. Because when we look at the fundamental energies, the gunas, what we see is we get to learn about the planetary energy or the particular planet that dominates Vishaka. So, and also we learn about its deep nature. So on its most basic level, Vishaka, like all the nakshatras in the second third of the zodiac, they're all tamasic at their base. Now, what is tamasic? People say, oh, it's inertia, it's lazy, it's this, it's that. I don't like to think about it along that, but what I like to think about is an anchor. It's like putting a copper rod into the ground. That is tamasic. And so, yes, it can be inert. It can also, it can be very, create some stagnation and things of that nature. But really what it means in this particular case is it has to do with all the nakshatras in the second third, beginning, I believe it's at the beginning of Leo, all the way through the end of Scorpio. All those energies, all of the nakshatras associated through that second third of the zodiac, essentially what they're here to do is to really anchor into the material plane, to really establish the foundation. And so again, this is all spiritual in the end. Even though, oh, they have this material fixation, that kind of thing, like somehow it's unspiritual. The reality is that we're here to live both on earth as well as, you know, the heavens, so to speak. So every one of us is the hierophant, I guess, bringing heaven to earth on some level. So with Vishaka, though, it's interesting because on its secondary level, it is sattvic, and on the tertiary level, it is rajasic. So, well, what's that mean? So, sattvic means there's an openness, and rajasic means attaching activity. Okay, so we have openness, so meaning the inner experience of Vishaka is open, right? And then it's also, in terms of how it's expressing out into the world, is rajasic, meaning activity. So you have this openness, which could be about information, it could be about a lot of things, but it's also got this expansive energy. So what does that mean? That means Jupiter. So Jupiter rules Vishaka. So if you're talking about the planet Jupiter interacting with tamasic inert energy, so what you get is they like to use these descriptions like they're incredibly one-pointed. So one of the things you could say is that these folks have blinders on and they're looking at their goal. All right, so their goal is material and they're ever expanding along that material path. This is problematic on some level And really what it comes down to, why is it problematic? Well, it's problematic if they're not making the right choices, right? So what can happen here? So Swati, let me talk about Swati really quick. Swati is the nakshatra that happened just prior. Swati was ruled by Rahu. And Swati, once again, on its base level, was about material. Rahu is an energy of destiny, so to speak. So in Swati, what they do is they get the exaltation of achievement in Swati. So the material world achievement happens in Swati because they have that destiny drive, and they don't necessarily see the goal. They're, with Swati, they're encouraged by their social engagements in order to reach that goal, and they learn about their potentials through their social environment in order to reach that goal. Well, in Vishakha, this is all just blown up, right? So they have, in Vishakha, it's expanded energy. It keeps expanding and expanding and expanding, and it is insatiable. This is insatiable energy. They can reach a goal, and it's just, they get reach the goal, they achieve it, and then it's like, eh. And I believe one of the symbols, if I'm recalling correctly, is the arches. There's arches that are associated with Vishakha. So oftentimes you see arches. I think there's a major arch in Paris, France, that had something to do with victory. So what you think about is ceremony, because I think arches are often used in wedding ceremonies, let's say in India. So ceremony, pomp, um, achievement, all that sort of thing. So Vishakha is very, 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 very capable of achieving a great deal. So the question, though, is always goes back to, how are they achieving? What are they achieving? So one of the other things that Vishakha is sort of symbolic of, or means, is fort. That's key. That's absolutely key. Like I said at the beginning of this video, Vishakha is the pinnacle. I may not have said this, I don't remember. But Vishakha is the pinnacle of the necessity to make choice. Because they are so one-pointed, they have those blinders on, they create a goal, they go to that goal no matter what. That's key here. So no matter what, they're going after that goal. I'm thinking of some celebrities and politicians in the back of my head that have this prominent, these are difficult people. I won't name names. But as they're driving towards whatever their goal is, again, if you're only seeing the goal, you will step over people in order to get to that goal. You will do unwholesome things in order to get to that goal. And then what ends up happening is you get that goal and there's this sense of emptiness, right? Because it's Jupiter. Jupiter's constantly expanding these people's ambitions. So there is no end here, right? So they're always going to be confronted with, I achieved my goal, now I feel empty. But that's, generally that is a lesson of folks who are generally fixated on material path. It doesn't matter if it's in Vishakha or other nakshatras. The reality is you retain something materially, it's satisfying for some period of time. Hey, I got this new car or house or whatever it may be. And then it just sort of becomes normal. And then you sort of like, next goal. So these folks are always having to create one goal after another goal after another goal after another goal. Until they address the fact that they constantly feel empty. So the emptiness, how do they fill that void? How do they fill that emptiness? Well, this nakshatra exists within Libra. At least I believe it's the first 3 quarters of this, and then the last quarter is in Scorpio. So what we have is we have Venus energy. So you think about Venus, you think about, I tend to think about it's like magnetism. It's sensuality, it's material level magnetism. It's what we want to draw into our life, what we may desire. It's about the senses, it's sensual, it's all those different things. So Venus and Jupiter don't really get along well. So this creates a bit of a conflict here. So these folks can head down a path of excessiveness in terms of parties, alcohol, sex, drugs, all that good stuff. And even if they start to go get curious in, let's say, the occult, sort of spirituality on some level, they could go into kind of like black magic or try to start exercising power over others, because their goal is, again, these individuals can become very egoic and their goal can become essentially domination over others, right? So because it's a social energy here. So this is social energy. And the other issue around here is that they will often, because their goal is their primary focus, they may be kind of fake. There could be some like uh, false, uh, how do I say this? Superficiality, like their sort of exterior could say one thing, but on their insides they're just burning up. But this energy here is, well, it's ruled by Agni, which is the god of fire, which actually, in a lot of ways, talks about the activity that's associated with Vishaka, and also Indra. And Indra, I'm not great with the understandings here, but it's the god of the lord of the demigods. So it's not so much a god as I guess in the mythology, he's a kind of an energetic placeholder. And so anyway, I don't want to go down that. That's a little complex for me even to understand. Um, so here, just keeping in mind that how do we fill their voids? So eventually, like I said, Vishaka, what it can do is, again, keeping in mind that there's a fork here. So there's always a choice to make. So as these individuals, let's say, hey, I keep running into the same issue. I achieve something, I feel empty, I drink, I do drugs, I have sex, and I'm looking for all these like temporary fixes. The reality is that in the end, if they start to make the choices to, let's say, connect to spirit, their intuition, which is these folks are incredibly capable of doing, they can also get that single pointed focus into spirituality, right? So this could turn incredibly positive, and these folks become very powerfully spiritual, right? So in a spiritual sense, and so they have all, like I said, this could become incredibly positive. And goes back to what I said at the beginning, which is really everything comes down to the sort of choices you make in life. And this is true, like I said, of all those really uncomfortable nakshatras, is that we all have that potential to make the correct choices and to sort of um, weed out the karma that comes along with these placements. So let me go into the padas really quick. Because in the padas, the thing you have to think about the padas are interesting because the padas, in a lot of ways, describe the life path. It describes the how quickly the life path evolves or how slow. The other thing it describes is how all the four padas exist within Vishaka. So if you have Vishaka as a prominent placement somewhere in your chart, think about moon, think about sun, north node, etc., etc. So if you have this as a dominant energy, ascendant. So if you have this as a dominant energy, all four padas still function in your chart, right? But you're going to have a dominance of one or the other. So keep that in mind. So the life path for Vishaka is Mars, Venus, Mercury, Moon, fast moving planets. So they have the potential to evolve very quickly. And even though there's a quick evolution, quick movement with these energies, one of the things is that, I guess one of the well-known things about Vishaka is that they will make easy things hard, right? And because again, they have the blinders on, so they'll make everything like more difficult than it has to be sometimes. Again, I have this in my chart. I can relate to that. So it becomes overly difficult. It doesn't have to be that hard. The reality is, for them, it does have to be that hard. They have to go towards their goals the way they're going to go towards their goals. They have to learn the lessons the way they're going to learn their lessons. So um, let's talk about the padas. First pada, Mars. So Mars rules the first pada. I kept seeing words associated with the first pada like activity. Okay, the word I like for Mars, because now we have Mars mixing with Jupiter, mixing with Venus. So what we have here is instinct. Okay, so the first pada falls within Libra. It is very instinctual energy. Mars, you can think about it in your mind as being like, I say this all the time, it's a teenage boy, right? So teenage boys, and they call Mars a malefic planet, like it's negative or something. And to me, Mars is a very spiritual planet. Think about it, it's a circle with an arrow that slightly points upward. That arrow always indicates, well, yes, it indicates activity, but what it does is it's always driving you towards something spiritual. So with Mars, you want to think about trial and error. So it's instinct. So there's an automatic energy to this. It's instinctual. You're going towards something. You hit a wall. You change direction. That's Mars. So it's trial and error. So keep that in mind. With if you were born with the first pada, as being a dominant energy. Think about instinct, think about movement, and think about knowing that there are no mistakes, right? I think that's really important, is that if you have a lot of trial and error process in your life, there are no mistakes. The only time there's negative, well, I would say the ultimate negative outcomes only exist if you fail to learn the lessons, right? Something bad happens, that's okay. Life has good and bad. We have preferences for the good shit, right? But the reality is that something bad happens. If you don't derive the lesson, then that is the only failure. If something bad happens, but you can say, hey man, I grew through that experience, you win. You always win. This is very triumphant energy if you can find the lessons, as opposed to what Vishakha's tendency might be, which is to drugs, alcohol, sex, and try to sort of cover it over with like indulgences and hedonism. Okay, so if you have Vishakha energy, you may be that word hedonism may be very familiar to you. So, second pada, Venus energy. So we got more Venus energy here. So I would say with the second pada, what you're going to, wrote down material. So again, Vishakha is very materially focused, but I would say it's in the second pada that it achieves at its highest point in terms of material success. Because you have this extra oomph of desire, you have this extra oomph of, drawing success towards you. I mean, Venus rather, to me, it always gets the sort of like, positive vibes, like, oh, Venus is so positive, it's such a benefic planet. And I don't really think about Venus as being terribly benefic, but that's because I'm one of these people that's hyper fixated on the spiritual, and I don't see Venus as being a particular spiritual planet. But what Venus does grant these individuals is a sense of self-sensuality. And if you think about pleasure as a pathway into the body, there is a potential within Vishakha that these individuals can become very anchored into the body, into the vehicle, in that there's just this extra level of sensuality. And this also in some ways like a remedy for the fact that we have Jupiter and Venus mixing here. And so Venus wants to anchor you into the earth, right? So you think about Taurus is ruled by Venus, anchors you into the earth. Libra, ruled by Venus, and wants to anchor you into social engagements. Jupiter just expands, right? So like I said, with this, you get that additional anchoring into potentially the body if these individuals pay attention to their intuition, gut instinct, things of that nature. Because again, if you have more access to the physicality, more access to sensuality, more access to social engagement, you start to be able to sort of determine what's the correct social situation for me. In the case of the second pada, really pay attention to your intuition. That will guide you if that person or that practice or that situation or that food or whatever is correct for your energy. Important. Third pada, ruled by Mercury. I wrote down conflict. So the third pada can get messy. It's not necessarily bad. I kind of feel like in some ways that Mercury had added a little bit of some levity here, right? That's in my head, that's how I kind of think about it. But something I was reading, which actually makes a lot of sense. So you have these individuals that are incredibly one-pointed, right? They're very single-pointed, very focused on that goal, got the blinders on, which contradicts the energy of Mercury. Mercury is this or that. It is the intellect, is the ability to see this or that. It's one of the reasons why I like Geminis a lot. Like, I like having conversations with Geminis. They don't get all emotionally heated up about something. I can have this conversation with them. And since it's ruled by Mercury, you have this conversation and you're like, hey, I'll say something because I tend to be very emotional by nature. I say, hey, blah, 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 blah. And maybe I said something that totally contradicts what their belief system is. They don't really lash out at me emotionally because they have this discernment. They can look at this and they can look at that and they say, oh, that's correct for me or it's not correct for me, but they don't lash out emotionally necessarily. So what ends up happening in the third pada here is you have discernment and this open-mindedness, but it conflicts with the single-pointedness. So I would say probably I should have wrote down cognitive dissonance. That might be a good description of what might happen in pada 3, is there might be some cognitive, some clashing here. So those of you who are born in Pada 3, help me out here so you can leave some messages down below. Let me know how you experience this, because in my head, I just see conflict between open-mindedness and single-pointedness. Fourth Pada. Ooh. Yeah, you can tell I actually really enjoyed studying on Vishakha. Vishakha is, like I said, other than it being a prominent energy in my chart, I have a preference for the nasty, difficult nakshatras, because there's the greatest potential for growth here. And so the fourth pada, moon. Oh wow. So now you're talking about emotional needs. We're talking about the fluctuations of the water, right? So moon affects the tides, and it affects the waters of the body, the emotions, right? So I wrote down emo, which basically meant emotional, and volatility here, right? This is we could get some volatility with this energy. You've got this constant expanding material energy that's very fiery, very active, and then you add emotions to that, right? So fiery energy, active, and then emotional instability. So the fourth pada, start meditating. Because you are now in Scorpio as well, right? So we're adding some Mars here, at least in terms of its traditional rulership. You could say Pluto too, but we'll stick with the traditional rulership of Mars. So we're talking about more fire. So more fire. So again, this is all about war, right? Mars is war. Mars is activity. So emotions, instability. You get it. Emotionally volatile. That's Pada 4. I think that's all I want to talk about this nakshatra. Hopefully, you kind of got a better idea of these energies, and just keep in mind, if this is an energy that's prominent in your chart, make choices, cultivate neutrality, cultivate objectivity, do yoga, connect to the vehicle, connect to the body, because the more you're connected to the body, the more it slows life down in a way, and it gives you a more solid foundation, a more grounded foundation. So and again, once you ground in the body, also the intuition, your instincts, all those signals that we get from spirit are here to guide us. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you happen to want your astrology chart interpreted, human design chart interpreted, if you happen to be in Chicago and you need energy work done or body work, please reach out. I have my website posted down below the video. Or if you are a guy who's got guy issues, wink, wink, please reach out. Same thing. Website posted down below the video. So with all that said, thank you very much.